All right, we welcome you to a special edition of our town hall tonight. Inauguration ceremonies for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, kicking off with a national moment of unity and remembrance, a nationwide COVID-19 memorial.
And this event is to honor the nearly 400,000 lives lost to the pandemic.
Right now, unfortunately, we're having a little bit of technical difficulty and the shot is going in and out. What you're looking at the moment is the front of the Capitol there. You can see House Speaker Nancy Pelosi near the middle of your screen. She is leading other lawmakers right now in a moment of silence. It is on the other side of Washington, D.C. right now near the Lincoln Memorial where this service is taking place, featuring soon-to-be President-elect Joe Biden along with his family and others. Again, we can't show you that picture at the moment, but it's coinciding with what you're seeing right here on the steps of the Capitol as House Speaker Nancy Pelosi leads a moment of silence.
And these observances extend far beyond Washington, D.C. Landmarks across the country are being lit up to mark the somber remembrance. On your screen now, we can see some live shots of some local landmarks, City Hall, the Electric Tower, also New York City and Boston in there as well. Cities and towns, big and small, are taking part. The Presidential Inaugural Committee says this is a reflection on what has been one of the more challenging periods in our nation's history ahead of the start of a new national journey beginning tomorrow. And going back now to the Lincoln Memorial for a ceremony that is underway, we are going to hear from President-elect and the Vice President-elect. We are streaming this right now for you on our website and our mobile app. Meanwhile, just over 18 hours from now, President-elect Joe Biden will take his oath of office. And one of the people who helped him win the election is from Williamsville.
Liz Allen worked in the Obama White House years ago. She joined the Biden campaign to specifically lead communications for whomever his vice president ended up being, the presidential pick, I should say. It turned out to be Kamala Harris. I talked with Liz about what we can expect after tomorrow. Liz, thanks so much for coming on the show. I want to start with what is, I think, the big challenge ahead of this incoming administration. And Joe Biden has talked about it a lot, the importance of uniting the country and coming together. But as you know, deep divisions remain surrounding the impeachment, surrounding the election. How does Joe Biden accomplish what he has set out to do here in uniting the country?
Sure. Well, thanks so much for having me, Michael. It's a pleasure to be back talking to the hometown audience. You know, look, I think Joe Biden will continue to model behavior that encourages compromise and empathy. And I think those are two very key components of moving forward and encouraging a more sort of unified community, as it were. But I think the most important thing to note when we're talking about unity is that, in my view, it's a participation sport, right? So it's up to all of us to play our part and not just to look to our leaders and expect unification to be something that happens automatically just because there's a new party in office or new people in Washington. It really is up to us in our own communities and in our own lives and relationships to also live that type of example with empathy and compassion as well. But I do think that obviously having leaders who show that example are going to be key. And it's my hope that with the inauguration, we can at least start to move forward as a country. And in the meantime, hold people accountable that need to be held accountable, and do the really hard work to try to at least align on a set of goals and values for the American people, even though, of course, the two parties are always going to come at it with different ways on how to achieve some of those goals. But I think the hope when we talk about unity, it's not to hope for complete agreement. It's to at least hope that we can agree on a set of goals and values.
We learned that Democrats are going to take control of the Senate thanks to those Georgia elections the same day that the Capitol insurrection happened. And I think that kind of got lost in the news cycle a little bit. Can you talk to me about the significance of Democrats now having control of the U.S. Senate? It's going to be 50-50, and your former boss, essentially Kamala Harris, will be the tie-breaking vote. How does that change the dynamic for the Biden-Harris administration moving forward?
Well, certainly from a legislative standpoint, it gives the Democrats an opportunity to pass more of their agenda. But look, I also think with a 50-50 split, there's going to be a lot of compromise needed, right? The filibuster is still in place. A lot of legislation will still need the filibuster-proof 60 votes in the Senate, which means we will need Republicans to join with Democrats to pass legislation that hopefully they can agree on is in the best interest of the American people. Joe Biden and his administration have a plan to pass a COVID relief bill, and then hopefully in the next few months, a larger economic stimulus bill and further COVID relief. And most leaders in both of the parties can agree that we need to do that for the American people. And so with Chuck Schumer as majority leader instead of Mitch McConnell, it obviously gives the Democrats a bigger opportunity to have their legislative priorities front and center. But it's still the case that the Senate will certainly be a place that's going to need bipartisan consensus for a lot of the big legislation. I think the other thing, Michael, when you think about the Georgia outcome is what it says about the Democratic Party's organizing and structural advantages looking ahead to 2022 and 2024. So I think the implications of what we saw in Georgia don't just extend to the immediate congressional term, but also serve as a model for how Democrats can organize effectively in states that have traditionally not been blue. And what Stacey Abrams did in Georgia can now serve as a model to others, whether it's in Texas or other states, to show how do you register voters, how do you make sure voters are not being disenfranchised, and then see what can happen when everyone's given an equal opportunity to vote.
You worked very close with Vice President-elect Harris. What is something about her that maybe we don't know?
Great question. Well, first of all, she has a great love of music, so she's always listened to music to help relieve all the stress. But look, I think she was born to parents in the civil rights era, and she was a child in Berkeley and in Oakland, California during the protests. She remembers what that was like as a young child to be taken to demonstrations where you're fighting for civil rights, fighting for equal rights. And so, Vice President-elect Harris is a woman who has spent her whole life being a public servant. And one really interesting thing that came out of my discussions with her that she then talked about quite a bit publicly was, she got in the system to help change the system. She realized as a Black woman, as a South Asian woman, that the system, in this case, the justice system that she was long part of as Attorney General and a district attorney in California, disproportionately disadvantaged people of color. And so she's someone who, instead of trying to change it from the outside, did the, I think, harder job of going on the inside and trying to change it. And so that kind of ethos really is instilled in her today, and I think she'll bring that with her to the office of the vice president.
Finally, there's been a lot of discussion about what kind of vice president she will be, what kind of role she will have in this Biden-Harris administration. What do you anticipate that role being?
I think she is looking at this as a full partnership with Joe Biden, just as he is. She often says, Joe Biden provided a template for how to be a great vice president after his partnership with Barack Obama. And she and Joe Biden struck the same kind of deal that Joe Biden had with Barack Obama, which is, we're not always going to agree. We can come at things with different points of view. Certainly we come at them with different lived experiences, but I want to be the last person in the room. And so that kind of is underpinning their partnership as they look forward. I would not expect her to have some kind of discrete portfolio that kind of has her kind of off to the side. I would very much expect this to be a full partnership between her and Joe Biden. And frankly, the fact that she's only been in Washington for 4 years is in many ways an advantage to her. Joe Biden is a creature of Washington after 40 plus years of public service to the American people. And I think in some ways, Kamala Harris and her team will be a really important voice in the room to make sure that, a diversity of experiences are being represented.
Liz Allen is a Buffalo native and former key member of the Biden-Harris campaign, now back working in the private sector in Washington, D.C. Liz, it's great to talk to you. Thanks for your time.
Thanks, Michael. Great to see you.
Well, and besides the inauguration, the other big story in D.C. is the impeachment of President Trump and questions to our Verify team about the upcoming Senate trial. People are asking, what is the difference between that and a trial in criminal court? Evan Kosloff has the answer.
Our sources are constitutional attorney Robert Peck, Dr. Mark Graber from the University of Maryland Law, and Ilya Soman, a law professor at George Mason University.
Impeachment is an entirely different process from the criminal process, even though it shares some of the words that describe the process.
And the rules are completely different as well.
There are some very strict rules for a criminal trial: right to an attorney, right to cross-examine witnesses, right to call witnesses. These rules don't exist for an impeachment. The Senate determines their own rules.
You might recall that in last year's impeachment trial, the Senate did not call any witnesses. And Dr. Graber says there's no jury making up a unanimous decision. It's all up to senators. Also, they don't have to prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt, like in a criminal trial.
The Constitution doesn't set any standard. Senators determine for themselves.
The Constitution provides that someone who has been convicted in impeachment is still eligible to be tried in a criminal case.
So we could verify an impeachment trial is completely separate from a criminal trial. They just share some of the same terms. With your Verify, I'm Evan Kozloff.
Thanks as always, Evan. If there is something that you would like us to look into, reach out on social media or email verify@wgrz.com.
Yeah, you can also text us. You see the text 2 line number there. It's 849-2200.